Late one night, the police received a frantic call from a neighbor, claiming that the abandoned house next door was making a lot of noise, likely due to people breaking in to deal drugs. Responding quickly, the officers arrived to find the house still filled with loud, disturbing sounds. Entering quietly, they expected to confront intruders but were met with an eerie silence, save for the persistent noise. As they moved through the dark, empty rooms, the sound grew louder, leading them to the kitchen. There, they discovered the back door broken, swinging open and shut at an impossible speed, violently hitting other furniture. The officers were unnerved, especially since there was no one to explain this phenomenon. Just as the tension peaked, a stack of plates suddenly fell from a cabinet, shattering on the floor without any apparent cause. Terrified and bewildered, the police left the house, unable to explain what they had witnessed. When they returned the next day, everything was eerily calm, the door was still, and the house was silent once more. The neighbors, too, reported that they never heard the strange noises again. To this day, the events of that night remain a chilling, unsolved mystery, leaving the abandoned house shrouded in an aura of fear and uncertainty. One evening, the police got a call from a woman who was crying and was very scared. She said her daughter had been kidnapped and that she had received a call telling her to bring $100,000 to this specific place to get her daughter back. The woman was so upset that she could barely speak through her tears. While the police were trying to calm her down and get more information, she suddenly said she couldn't take it anymore. Then, they heard a gunshot through the phone. After that, there was only silence. The police thought she had hurt herself, so they rushed to her house. When they got there, they didn't find anyone. There was no sign of the mother, no blood, and no sign that anyone had been shot. It was like she had just disappeared. A little while later, the daughter came home from school. She hadn't been kidnapped at all. The police were very confused and worried because they couldn't find the mother anywhere. To this day, the mother is still missing, and no one knows what really happened that night. It's one of the strangest and scariest cases the police have ever faced. One night, Officer Thompson and Officer Lopez got a call about a man causing trouble at a convenience store. When they arrived, they found a messy-looking man named Jake who was yelling and scaring people. He looked like he had taken drugs and was saying strange things about shadows and monsters. The officers calmed him down and took him to the police station. In the car, Jake suddenly shouted,
"Watch out for the black dog. It's coming for you."
The officers thought he was just talking nonsense. Later that night, Officer Thompson was driving home when he saw a big, black dog standing in the road. He had to swerve his car to avoid hitting it. He remembered Jake's warning and felt a little scared, but thought it was just a coincidence. The next day, during questioning, Jake said there would be a fire in a building downtown. Officer Lopez wrote it down, not really believing him. That afternoon, there was a call about a fire in an old warehouse downtown. The officers rushed there and found the building on fire, just like Jake had said. They put out the fire but didn't know how it started. Officer Lopez decided to ask Jake more questions. Jake, looking very scared, talked about a big storm coming and bad things happening in the town. He even gave a specific date and time for when it would happen. As the date got closer, the officers were extra careful. On the night Jake talked about, a huge storm hit the town. The power went out, and people started getting hurt in weird accidents. The emergency services were very busy. Jake's warnings came true, and the officers realized he had predicted everything correctly. They didn't know how he did it. Jake was sent to a hospital to get help, but he kept talking about future events. Some officers thought Jake had a special power, while others thought it was just luck. The mystery of Jake's strange predictions is still unsolved. Late one evening, the police received a 911 call from a child sobbing and saying she was alone and scared. She said her parents had left, and someone was trying to get into the house. The officers tried to keep her calm and asked for her address. The call suddenly went silent. The police rushed to the location the child had given them, a quiet suburban home. When they arrived, they found the front door slightly open. They entered the house, calling out for the child, but no one answered. The officers searched the house from top to bottom. It was empty, and there were no signs of a struggle. They found a family photo on the wall but noticed that it was covered in dust, as if no one had lived there for a long time. They contacted the neighbors, who informed them that the house had been vacant for months after the family had moved away. No one had seen or heard from them since. Perplexed, the officers checked the call logs. The 911 call had come from the house's landline, which was still connected even though the house was supposed to be empty. To this day, the mystery of the crying child remains unsolved, leaving the officers haunted by the unanswered call for help. 20 years ago, a father murdered his wife and son in their secluded house deep in the woods. After that, he vanished without a trace. Despite numerous efforts, the police never found him. This unsolved case haunted investigator Morgan, who visited the house every year, hoping to find new evidence. One night, Morgan, accompanied by officers Blake and Carter, decided to investigate the house again. The house, abandoned for 2 decades, was a crumbling structure covered in graffiti and eerie drawings left by intruders. This time, the kitchen walls were filled with disturbing messages, all in the same handwriting. They took pictures and continued their search. As they approached the basement, they noticed the door was broken, a recent development. Cautiously, they descended the stairs, with their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Suddenly, a man sprang up from a small room under the stairs, screaming and wielding a knife. The officers were startled and took several minutes to calm the man down. The man looked terrible, likely a homeless person using the house for shelter. After he surrendered, the officers escorted him to their car. During questioning, the man revealed a surprising amount of knowledge about the house and its history. Suspicious, they dug deeper into his background and made a shocking discovery. The man was the missing father. He had returned to the house after all these years, mentally ill and diagnosed with schizophrenia. Finally, after 2 decades, they had caught the man they least expected. The case that had haunted investigator Morgan for so long was finally closed. It was a foggy evening when Officer Daniels and his partner, Officer Reed, received a call about a disturbance in the old, abandoned insane asylum on the outskirts of town. The building had been closed for decades, but locals often claimed to hear strange noises and see lights flickering inside. The officers arrived at the dilapidated structure, its windows broken and walls covered in creeping ivy. They cautiously entered through the main door, which creaked ominously as it swung open. The air inside was thick with dust, and the faint smell of mildew lingered. As they made their way through the dimly lit corridors, with their flashlights flickering against the peeling wallpaper, they began to hear faint whispers. They called out, but received no reply. The whispers grew louder, seemingly coming from the direction of the old patient rooms. When they reached the end of the hallway, they found a door ajar. Pushing it open, they discovered a room filled with old medical equipment and rusty bed frames. Suddenly, the temperature dropped sharply, and a chilling breeze swept through the room. The whispering stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. Just as they turned to leave, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. They quickly shone their flashlights in the direction of the noise but saw nothing. Deciding to investigate, they followed the sound to the main hall, where they were met with a shocking sight. A spectral figure dressed in a tattered hospital gown stood at the end of the corridor, its face obscured by shadows. Officer Daniels called out, but the figure remained silent and motionless. As they approached, the figure suddenly vanished, leaving only the faint echo of its footsteps behind. Shaken, the officers hurried back to their patrol car, determined to report the incident. The next morning, they returned with a team to investigate, but found no evidence of the ghostly encounter. The asylum was silent, and no signs of recent activity were found. The whispers, the footsteps, and the spectral figure remained a mystery. Locals continued to avoid the old asylum, and the story of Officer Daniels and Officer Reed's encounter has become a chilling legend among the police force. The phantom patrol that haunts the abandoned halls of the asylum remains one of the town's most unsettling unsolved mysteries.